If you've taken the StrengthsFinder instrument before, you end up with a list of your top 5 strengths. Okay, so what do you do with it? In this episode, we'll walk you through an actual debriefing of the instrument so you can get more out of your assessment results too. This is Coaching for Leaders, episode number 90.
Produced by Innovate Learning, maximizing human potential.
Greetings from Orange County, California. This is Coaching for Leaders, and I'm your host, Dave Stachowiak. This is a weekly show to help people be better leaders through improved communications, human relations, and personal productivity. Man, it's hard for me to believe that we're at episode 90. 100 episodes coming up here soon. Hey, I'm so glad that you have joined me again this week, because this is the follow-up to last week's episode number 89. And if you listened last week already, you'll remember that I welcomed Steve Dosier, a StrengthsFinder expert from Blue Star Intel, to come in and to have some conversation with us about what StrengthsFinder is, why we should care about it, what's the history behind the instrument, the theory, the process, everything. And then we promise this week what we do is, rather than talk more about kind of the theory behind StrengthsFinder, is actually get into the meat of it with some real results. And it doesn't get any more real than me opening up my StrengthsFinder and sharing it with you, and Bonni opening up hers. And so what we did is we have also recorded a full debrief with Steve and Bonni and myself of walking through our results. And so we've, at least I've placed my results online. I'll give you the link for that at the end of the show here. I hope that this is helpful to you to get a feel for the types of conversation and the types of thinking you can do as you're walking through an assessment results like StrengthsFinder, or, really you could apply this to a lot of different assessments. So the important thing is, whenever you take assessments, is to be able to get some value from the data and to process it. And so we're going to spend a bunch of time doing that on this episode. Hope it's going to be valuable to you. So let me jump right in and roll the debrief with Bonni, myself, and Steve. Here we go. I am pleased to welcome back to the show from last week Steve Dosier, and I'm also joined here by Bonni. And you, if you listened already to episode number 89, you'll remember that Steve is a former Gallup consultant and has been working with StrengthsFinder for many, many years, and has been promoting and implementing Gallup science to Fortune 500 organizations. He now runs his own firm called Blue Star Intel. He's been doing this for a long time, about 20 years. So he brings a lot of wisdom about StrengthsFinder to us. And I'm thrilled this week because Bonnie's here with us as well. And what we talked about doing on last week's episode number 89 was to spend some time this week to actually walk through our results. And so Steve's back here with us, and we're going to talk about Bonnie's results and my results. And glad to have you back, Steve.
Thanks, David. It's great to be here. Good to see you, Bonni.
Nice to see you too.
All right, so let's jump right in and take a look at this. By the way, I should mention, if you haven't listened to episode number 89 yet, you may want to go back and listen to that. Go to coachingforleaders.com/89. That will give you the overview, the history, everything you kind of need to know about StrengthsFinder up front. And but now we're going to jump in and talk about our results. Okay, Steve, how should we start this?
Well, first off, I always ask anybody that's taken StrengthsFinder if they had any general impressions of the assessment themselves, either the duration it took to take it or any clarification around the language or anything at all, any reactions.
Well, I remember it taking less time than I thought it was going to take. I think it said 30 to 45 minutes online, and I don't think it took me quite that long. I think maybe it was more 20 to 25 minutes, but it seemed pretty straightforward as far as the assessment. We actually bought the book. Here's how geeky we are. For Christmas, Bonni and I got each other the StrengthsFinder 2.0 book in our stockings. That's how geeky we are.
As in, didn't know that the other one was buying it for the other one.
Oh, how nice. What a coincidence.
And we also both bought each other, not knowing the other person bought it, a scale that connects with our exercise pedometer, and it goes over the Wi-Fi and tracks your weight that way. Both bought it, not knowing the other one bought it.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, my guess would be maybe you have some strengths in common then.
Yes,
Yeah.
we do.
I don't know if there's one of the 34 strengths is geekiness, but if it was, we would score extremely high on that, both of us.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So any initial impressions other than that, maybe Bonni, from your side?
No, not necessarily. I agree with Dave. It didn't take that long. And I also didn't find myself really agonizing over the this or that kind of question. So
Good. My advice is always go with your gut. Your first level reaction is usually right. People that agonize over it, I think, overthink the test. And I find on average it takes somewhere between 20 to 30 minutes. So 20, 25 minutes is good. What I'd like to start out with then is ask you each if you will tell me what your top 5 strengths are. Then I would, for the benefit of our audience, read what the definitions of these strengths are. Why don't we just go through your lists first and then I'll review them.
okay, so my top 5 are strategic, relator, achiever, connectedness, and futuristic.
Okay, so for the benefit of our audience, I'd like to let you know that people who have strategic are especially talented with creating alternative ways to proceed. When they're faced with any given scenario, they can quickly spot the relevant patterns and issues. That's strategic. Relator is someone who enjoys close relationships with others. They find deep satisfaction in working hard with friends to achieve a goal. Achiever is one of those themes where somebody works hard to accomplish much. So anybody talented and achiever will possess a great deal of stamina and take immense satisfaction in being busy and productive. Connectedness, which is Bonnie's 4th talent or strength. People exceptionally talented in connectedness have faith in links among all things. They believe there are few coincidences and that almost everything has every event has meaning. And finally, futuristic. People with futuristic are inspired by the future and what could be. They energize others with their visions of the future. So those are Bonnie's top 5. David, how about you?
All right. And those sound like Bonni, by the way, many of them. We actually have 2 that are the same. So we both have futuristic and we both have relator. And then my other 3 are intellection, learner, and responsibility.
Great. So the two in common would be both of you have the same number 2, and her number 5 is actually your number 1. So I could see where you both connect. And David also shared with me that there's this connection with technology and their use of technology and leveraging of technology, which may have something to do, obviously, with that futuristic as well. So to clarify David's 3 strengths that we haven't talked about, we've already talked about futuristic and relator. Let's clarify intellection. Intellection theme, people with the intellection theme are characterized by intellectual activity. They're introspective and appreciate intellectual discussions. So that's intellection.
So this is like why I like to read so much, read books and talk to people about random things, which sometimes are not of any practical value.
Well, and sometimes because you have intellection, maybe that conversation might actually even be happening in your own head.
Which is for sure. For sure. It happens all the day long in my own head. Nice.
And then learner, we'll pull up learner, which is people who do have the learner theme. Have great desire to learn and want to continuously improve. The process of learning rather than the outcome excites them. So that's learner.
Cool.
And ultimately responsibility. This is the one that probably saves you from all these wonderful thinking themes. People especially talented in responsibility theme take psychological ownership of what they will do. They are committed to stable values such as honesty and loyalty, which is a very respectable talent to have. So that's responsibility.
Okay, great.
All right. Now I'll ask both of you, and Bonni, starting with you, what areas of these strengths do you strongly agree with? What resonated with you strongly?
Well, it's amazing looking at the report that is provided after you take it. A lot of it resonates. I mean, in fact, at the end, I was sharing with you that they have some paragraphs that are written or maybe perhaps spoken by people who are of that same strength. And I kept thinking, these are my people. This is me completely. So a lot of the themes related, the working hard and wanting to be busy and be productive. In fact, I've thought about doing some writing on my own for other people who are faculty members like I am, professors, and helping them with this strength. And so that's something that I have a passion for communicating about. The strategic piece, I love that first phrase about finding alternate ways. So if I can't get there this way, can we go under it? How about over it? How about around it? That kind of thing.
You can totally do that too in an instant, which I admire about you. I always have admired that skill you have.
Definitely the sense of meaning around connectedness, and just how, in fact, Dave and I read a book when we were in our graduate program called The Fifth Discipline. And one of the things it teaches is about systems thinking, and that really we're all connected, and something that we do here can affect someone halfway around the world. And that book really resonated with me, and that idea that we really are all interconnected is something that resonates with me a lot. And certainly the relator you talked about with Dave, those close relationships. And I didn't actually pick up on this until this time when you were reading it, but that idea about achieving a goal together is something I really, really enjoy. That's very motivational to me. And then futuristic is both a great thing in my life, and then also can be a little bit of a curse because I am always living in the future. Mm-hmm. So as we've shared before on the show, Dave and I have a little boy who's about 1.5 years. And so when you've got a little toddler like that, if you don't play very well in the moment, it's going to be a little bit of a source of frustration, because that's, I think, one of the things I really always was looking forward to about being a parent was getting that time. But I'm always thinking about what's next? Where are we going next? As opposed to there's this little boy who's right in front of you and you don't need to go anywhere right now. You just need to sit here, sit tight, and be in the moment. And being in the moment is something that's definitely not a strength of mine.
I struggle with that too. Yeah.
Well, I could see, Bonni, from your perspective, just seeing the mix of your strengths with your strategic and your achiever combined with your futuristic, where perhaps you are not as focused on the moment as you could be because you're looking to accomplish things and you're looking for what's next. That's perfect language for anybody that has that combination of talents. However, it's great that you recognize that so you bring yourself back to the moment.
Yeah.
So, David, how about you? What strongly resonated with you when you read your theme descriptions?
Well, we both have futuristic, and I absolutely resonate with everything Bonnie's just said about kind of that. I really have to coach myself to stay in the moment sometimes, because I'm always thinking about the next thing, what could be created, what does the future look like, and I'm so energized by that. And I'm going to read one of the sentences from the StrengthsFinder 2.0 book that really resonated with me. It says, "When the present proves too frustrating and the people around you too pragmatic, you conjure up visions of the future and they energize you." And it totally does. I mean, I'm always thinking about what could be better, what could be different, how could this be re-engineered? So that definitely resonates with me. And then the other one that I like all of them and they all resonate with me. Relator really resonates with me because it says you're comfortable with intimacy. And that to me is really, when I first saw relator, I was like, well, maybe that one's not right. But when I read it, the definition, it really connects, because relator to me sounds much more like a person that really likes having strong, intimate, deep relationships with maybe a fewer number of people versus having more surfacey relationships with a large number of people. And I am definitely have a deeper relationships with a smaller number of people kind of person. So that, and I like that. I like that about me a lot. And then, responsibility for sure. As far as, if I say I'm going to do something, it gets done. Not always as fast as I want it to get done, but it'll always get done.
Right. And your responsibility is actually forcing you to pull that statement, that caveat out. Not always as fast, but there you go.
Right,
so it's a cycle. Are there any areas that didn't necessarily sound like you, or that you had some conflict with in any of your strengths?
I just shared a little bit about, there's a statement in mine about everything happens for a reason, and we won't be going into that eternal question too much on the show, but that was something that I had to keep myself reading because the rest of it completely resonates with me. But that's one of those sort of eternal questions. Does everything really happen for a reason? So that was the only thing, but everything else, every word of every other description really fits well. Yeah, I didn't have any disconnects.
How about you, David?
Yeah, I really didn't have any disconnects at all. I mean, when I read this, it really sounded very much like me. And I went through the book and actually highlighted, because one of the things I always ask clients to do when we're going through assessments is to take the assessment or the paperwork and highlight the things that sound like you. And I did a whole bunch of highlighting because a lot of this really sounds like me in many areas. So yeah, I think it's a really good snapshot.
Great. Well, the reason I asked that question, and for the benefit of our audience, is to let them know that the strengths are actually a collection of talent themes. For instance, communication is a strength, but there are themes associated with communication that might mean there's verbal communication, as in I'm talking to somebody. There's written communication. There's nonverbal and non-written communication. So there's other ways or there are a collection of themes that come under this. So because of that collection of themes, we don't necessarily expect every single sentence in that strength to describe somebody. It's definitely not a catch-all or a labeling mechanism for people, but it's good that you seem to resonate well with your top 5. Any closing comments from an individual perspective before we get into the partnership perspective?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. So here's a question I'll throw out and let you think about for a moment. What strengths do you feel you both connect upon and why? I know we talked a little bit about futuristic, but let's see what else you either connect upon that you have in common or maybe not have in common.
Well, yeah, futuristic for sure. I mean, we both very much are kind of that, what's the future going to look like? And also, I don't know, does planning fall in here, Steve, too, as far as like thinking about planning things out, what the future is going to be?
Yes, definitely. When somebody's planning, you're invoking futuristic because you're looking out, and Bonni maybe even invoking her strategic and futuristic.
Yeah, so I would say for sure we both do a lot of that. And I think that for the most part, that's really a strength in our relationship. I think the thing that maybe we fall short on sometimes is because both of us have such a strong strength in that. It's not often that we do things spontaneously, just as a family or as a couple. I mean, if we go on a trip or something like that, I mean, it is planned months in advance. There's schedules. I mean, Luke's got his own calendar online. Bonnie's got hers. I got hers. We got them all overlapped. I mean, that's the one thing that we probably don't do as much of, that I think we both could do a little more and be a little more flexible in that way.
Although having a toddler helps break some of those tendencies.
Totally
Luke has
does.
Introduced himself to the world and decided, I will help cure you of some of this.
Yeah, exactly. So, and inevitably he won't be futuristic, just like, Murphy's Law. So it's actually really good. I mean, being a parent is something that absolutely gets you better at being flexible. You have to.
Yes. As a father of twin 7-year-old girls, I relate. So
yeah, I know.
How much do you think that you could tell about their strengths when they were very young? When do you think that you started to see clues? And
yes, I actually, with my own children, I saw clues at about 18 months to 2 years. Mm-hmm. I saw where one would spend more time reading, and one would spend more time physically moving around and trying to rearrange furniture and bouncing on the furniture, et cetera. So I could see it early on, and then I see how that does develop. So there's a whole science about the neuroplasticity and the development of people and their talents around that.
Interesting.
Cool. Yeah, so I think that that's something that we definitely both connect on. And then there's just some things that there's so many things I like about Bonni. One of them, I do really like her ability to think strategically and to make very good, quick decisions on things. To the extent that, and we used to do this a lot more. Actually, I think we've both I've gotten a little better at this over the years, but anytime like we were going to purchase something or buy something, we still do this a lot now. Bonni usually will go and do the initial legwork on it and like do some reading and read reviews and things like that. And then, then she'll talk to me about it because she does such a great job of figuring out really the best option very quickly. I mean, she just has a knack for doing that. Whereas I would spend weeks, not weeks, but I would spend more time researching something. It's just not as good a use of my time because I don't do it as efficiently as she does. So that's something I've always really appreciated about her, is that ability to do that really quickly.
Great. And Bonni, anything else from your side that you see you connect on in these strengths?
Oh, I definitely connect with Dave's intellection and his learner piece. We typically listen to podcasts throughout the week independently when we're not together. And that's always fun to kind of revisit and talk about what we're reading and what we're listening to. And then on Sundays, actually, when we drive to church, we have sort of there's a game show podcast we like to listen to that reviews that week's news. And we'll actually play along with the game because there's one you have to predict which one of them which two of them are not true, and then which one is true. And that's just really fun for us to try to figure out which one is true and see if we can get that one right.
Which is Wait, Don't Tell Me. For those of you who are NPR fans, we love that show.
Yes. And then we also there's a political podcast that we enjoy listening to and together oftentimes, and we'll talk about that. So it's just fun to both enjoy learning so much. We actually met getting our master's degrees and then went on together to get our doctorates a few years after that. And so that's fun to connect on that level as well.
Well, what's interesting about this game concept is perhaps, and we don't, just for the benefit of our audience, again, we have strengths 1 through 5 for David and for Bonni, but I sense there may be a competitive strength somewhere in the 6 through 10. It would be interesting to find out. So great. Well, we talked a little bit about, David had mentioned how Bonni is good at doing the legwork on a purchase and the research and then coming up with some alternatives some choices and quick decisions. What strengths do you both feel that you, what do you find complementary about each other's strengths? Areas where one of you picks up the certain tasks or responsibilities where you let the other one do it because they're better suited for it, and you do other things that you're better suited for.
Well, I think one I would say is probably responsibility, just on things that are more like menial, like data tasks. And I think particularly about like tracking our finances. I tend to just have more of a mind for that, of getting into the nitty gritty and the details and reconciling bank accounts and things like that. So I've always taken that role in our relationship of just not making decisions on money, but actually tracking stuff and where money's going and, running the monthly reports and all that stuff. And I think Bonni would tell you probably that that's not something that's as much of a strength area for her as the details on those types of things.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it's something I do appreciate a lot. In fact, you started answering and I thought he picked mine because I rely a lot on his responsibility. And I also treasure that he's really loyal and honest. And
right.
He's a very intentional person. And even as you picked up on a little bit, wants to make sure that what he says is truthful, and he's very conscientious that way.
Oh, thanks.
And the fact that you actually use the word responsibility, you already understand this language and you could recognize that talent in David as well. And then what about Bonni? Anything else that you might see as complementary?
Yeah, beyond what I mentioned as far as the intellection is certainly complementary. It's something that I find mentally stimulating. So it's fun to be around him with that strength, and certainly the learner thing too, since we met in school and still both really enjoy learning.
So not having known this language prior or not having taken the assessment prior, do you recognize any way now where you leverage each other's strengths to get the best from each other in terms of how you either treated each other or communicated with each other? So Bonni, you might have seen that David's made up in a certain way, or David, that you see that Bonnie's made up in a certain way, so you know how to approach her. And can you translate that maybe into the strengths language a bit? I'll give you a for instance. My wife's first strength is activator, which means she's great at turning her thoughts into actions. That's my third strength. My first strength is maximizer, where I want to turn something good into something superb. So I think a little bit more about things. I might be a little bit more like David, where I analyze choices more and invoke my strategic and want to come up with the best option that will improve a situation or put somebody's best talent where it belongs. Whereas my wife is great at just jumping into activity and making something happen. Now, she does a great job on everything she does, but if something needs to be done with a precision scale of 100%, like communication with the IRS or any other transactional issues that have to be 100% perfect, that falls in my area of responsibility.
Right.
If something needs to be planned in like a great event or a vacation, that falls into her realm because she's great at making those quick decisions and making things happen very quickly.
Yeah, I think for me, it's less a eye-opening, and part of this is we've spent a lot of time doing assessments and being in this industry over the years, so we've talked a lot about this. So it's not so much something that's incredibly new that I hadn't thought about before. It's more of having the language to be able to describe it well. So, for example, I wouldn't necessarily have thought to use the word strategic to describe that skill set that Bonni has. But now that I've read that word, read the description, I'm like, yeah, that really is a great word that describes that strength that she brings, that talent that she brings. So that for me is helpful. That's what's most helpful looking at this, is just having the right language to use. And I think it was, I love the quote from Plato that says the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. And so for me, having that language to be able to use is really great, because I can think about that and figure out how I would use that to communicate with her, and also communicate with what I what I'd be asking for in our relationship.
I think for me, the piece around strategic and achiever can sometimes make me a little bit frenetic. I've been reading a lot about sort of our addiction to the busyness, and particularly as it relates to our use of computers and smartphones and things like that. So I think that both of us being more intentional and that futuristic, when we can create a vision of what our life might look like as a family, that Dave's responsibility can kind of calm down my achiever to say, for example, we recently took a vacation down to San Diego just for a couple of days. And this was, Dave, it was sort of a difficult time for me. It was a pretty high stress time in the semester of my teaching, and there was some other stuff going on. And so I was sort of figuratively kicking and screaming all the way down to San Diego. I did not want to be going and relaxing. I was going to go against my will, that kind of thing. But I think that sense of responsibility and stability that he brought to that picture, it wound up being as everyone listening to this podcast can predict, it turned out to be a wonderful time and really was a very peaceful experience.
Yeah. I'd forgotten about that. You were stressed out when we went down there, and I'm glad it worked out so well.
No, it sounds like we could do a whole segment on managing achiever in general, because I think achiever is the number one talent or strength as defined by Gallup in the world. And it may be because everybody that's taking this assessment is an achiever in the sense that they're working individuals or they're students or they're a member of a clergy or government organization. So that doesn't necessarily surprise us. But I think as humans, we all strive to not just be busy, but to accomplish something. It gives us a sense of purpose. So many times that drive can, if it goes in hyperdrive, keeps us from relaxing and either enjoying the moment or finding the time to find what I'll call the music between the notes. The silence between the notes, because we have to remember that music is also pauses. So good to know that as well.
So, and this is probably good for us to mention too, Steve, is that, of course, just because achiever isn't like one of my top 5 doesn't mean I'm not an achiever. It's not the one that rises to the top when we look at and put them all in order, but that we still all have some version of all of these talents to some extent.
Right. So the part of achiever that everybody has is some form of motivation. It's just a matter of what motivates you.
Yeah.
So
cool. So let's see. We probably have just time for maybe one more round here on questions. So what do we have next?
So to close out the question points, let me ask this: now that you know each other's strengths based on the Clifton StrengthsFinder report, what do you better understand and appreciate about each other that maybe you didn't see as clearly before?
Well, I think for me, certainly the strategy and achiever, I've always appreciated that about Bonni, but having more language around that and seeing that on this page here, I think helps me to recognize that strength even more. And it's interesting, her talking about me coming to, get ideas from her and bounce ideas off her, is as much as I do that, I probably should do more of that. And really, because I tend to, part of the challenge I have with at least my futuristic talent is I'll get in my own head and I'll start planning something and thinking something out for days or weeks, and I will never mention anything about it to anyone else. And then I'll just like, all right, here's what I'm going to do. And it turns out it's a horrible idea. So I think one thing I could do is probably bring her into conversations thinking that type of thing more, because I do tend to think in my own mind a lot and not think out loud very much. And that's something that would be really valuable to me in probably our marriage and our business too.
And for me, it's back to that responsibility piece again. I love how stable he is and that sense of honesty and loyalty. They have those silly assessments that I can't even remember when we were doing this, but there was some silly, what breed of dog are you? And of course, I don't think that there's any academic validity to those, but he not surprisingly turns out as a golden retriever.
Aww.
So
I'm a loyal golden retriever.
Yes, very much so. And then I also think it's just fun for us to think about how we can continue to connect on the futuristic piece and on the relator piece.
Good. Well, it's nice that you see that about each other, and you probably saw it before you had the strengths. David, if I could, I get asked all the time, how do we sustain this concept of strengths and keep these discussions open? Yeah. I'd just like to throw out a few suggestions for our audience and also for you as well.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, because I think that that's the challenge that a lot of times we have with these assessments is we'll sit down and have a conversation like this, and then people walk out of the room and they don't really do much differently. Right. So yeah, how can we kind of make that next step then?
So at the very basic level, it's always good. And if you're in an organization or even at home, you can post your top 5 so they're visible to each other and yourselves to remind yourselves. It's always good to review your strengths with your supervisor or your partner, your wife or husband. To also know your colleagues' top 5. For instance, I'm excited to learn about my children's top 5 at some point, but I've also, in addition to my colleagues, I know my family's top 5, so that we have those discussions as well. I also like to observe behavior, recommend that you do observe behavior and see if you can categorize what strength that might map to. Having a strengths partner, whether it's your husband, wife, coworker, supervisor, et cetera, is great. Gallup has a great business journal online, the Gallup Business Journal. You can subscribe at their site at www.gallup.com, and we can post that on your site.
Absolutely.
And then visiting Strengths Center, which is strengthscenter.com, is a Gallup site that has wonderful resources as well. I always tell people as well to try to pick one theme that you want to learn more about and conscientiously apply more. Certainly one theme that you have, not one that you want to try to adopt, because it's a lot easier to work with what you have. And define one thing that you might do differently starting tomorrow based on knowing your top 5 strengths. It makes you more intentional about what you're doing with your strengths and keeps the conversation going. And of course, in future segments, we have many more pieces of advice to give.
Great. Well, so one thing also to remember too is a lot of these resources are going to have been on the show notes from last episode, Coaching for Leaders, episode 89. So go to coachingforleaders.com/89 for all the resources, tools, many things Steve just mentioned. And then on this episode number 90, coachingforleaders.com/90, you'll get the list of our strengths and some of the questions we talked about today. And those, Steve, would it be okay for us to take these questions you've asked us and to put them up on the show notes?
Absolutely. Okay? They're not, they're public. So that's great.
Okay, great. So what we'll do is we'll post these, and that way if people want to go in and maybe even in their own marriages and friendships and community and businesses, they could use these questions as starting points for how they do that. And then I'd encourage you too, if you're getting serious about this and would really like some more advice and some coaching on this, is to make sure you reach out to Steve. Steve's company is Blue Star Intel. The best way to reach him is his email address. It's Steve Dosier at bluestarintel.com, and that's Steve, Dosier. I'll put it all onto the show notes as well. And then there's a phone number that people can reach out to, Steve?
It's 714-536-4871. That's the corporate number.
And all of that is on the show notes as well, too. So, hey, Steve, I am so grateful for you and you coming in. And I just wanted, before we let you go, just to mention, I don't know if this is a Gallup strength or not, but one strength that I really appreciate about you is I just appreciate your enthusiasm. I mean, when we first met, your enthusiasm for this work, your enthusiasm for wanting to bring this instrument to our audience and to share your wisdom. I mean, you've just basically volunteered your time to spend a whole bunch of time with us and sit down and recording. I so appreciate that about you, and I'm really grateful that you took the time to do this. And thank you for being a part of the show and a part of the Coaching for Leaders community. I'm just thrilled that you took the time to join us.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Bonni. It's my pleasure.
So there's a whole bunch of things to check out on the show notes, and the place to get them is at coachingforleaders.com/90. And if you go there, you're going to see a whole bunch of stuff. First and foremost, Steve was really kind to share all of the written questions. He wrote them out and shared them with me, and was very gracious to allow me to pass them along to you. And so all those questions, those debriefing questions, you'll find on the show notes. So be sure to go there to check them out. You'll also find a list of Bonnie's strengths, my strengths, and I've also included a link to my full report from the StrengthsFinder 2.0 assessment. It's 19 pages PDF. So you can, if you haven't ever taken StrengthsFinder before and want to see what one looks like, go ahead and go on the show notes there, and there's a link to download mine. I'll see if I can grab Bonnie's too. At the moment I'm recording this, I don't have access to it, but I'll see if she still has it. I'll post hers there as well. And so you can see what one looks like. And if you've already taken StrengthsFinder before, or maybe it's been a while, you could go on and just see what someone else's looks like. So if that's helpful to you, feel free to go online there and grab it. Again, that's coachingforleaders.com/90. It's also a great place to ask questions, jump in with comments or feedback about the episode. If you scroll down to the bottom, that'll take you to the discussion forum. You can also reach out to me by phone at 949-38-LEARN. Or you can always email me too, feedback@coachingforleaders.com. And I so appreciate so many of you that email me on a regular basis. It's great to connect with everyone by email. Thank you to all of you who have done that in the recent past. And one thing is, just keep in mind, if your question or if you're emailing me about something or have a question that might be relevant to others, take a moment to visit the show notes first, because if it is relevant to others, put it up on the show notes on the comment forum there, because that way when I respond, everyone will see that and be helpful to other folks too. But like I said, feel free to email me anytime as well. I'm always happy to chat with folks over email. Speaking of which, I want to send a thank you out to Beverly Meyer, Daniel Servant, Mark Loomis, Pirko Aminov, Sonia DeMalo, Jeremy Jin, Anwar Barziji. Oh, I don't know if I got that right. Anwar, I'm sorry if I messed up your last name there. And Mike Tadeo for following me this week on social media. Hey, if you'd like to stay connected with the show as well, simply go to coachingforleaders.com and you can find the social media icons on the homepage there. Lots of things that I'm posting on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, LinkedIn every week. What I'm putting up there is links to relevant leadership articles that are going on in the news, just articles I find fun and inspiring and educational and useful, most importantly, quotes, just tips, things that I find, and then just random fun stuff too. If you go up this week, there's a great picture of Luke over Memorial Day weekend in our new Radio Flyer red wagon. Oh, that was so much fun this weekend. So anyway, go check that out. And hey, a very special thank you to the person who goes by R Gray 4000 for writing a nice oh, that's not the right music. Let me get the right music here. Let's try this. That's much better. Thank you to R Gray 4000 for the nice review on iTunes. Thanks for mentioning Luke on the review too. It's the first time Luke's ever been mentioned on an iTunes review, I think. Even though he doesn't know the show exists. Hey, if this show's been valuable to you as well, please leave a written review on iTunes. That's actually super helpful on helping other people to find the show and join our community too. So if that is something you'd love to do, I'd so appreciate it. Go to coachingforleaders.com/iTunes. And thank you, R Gray 4000. I so appreciate it. Hey, if you'd like a midweek booster shot, I send out an email article every single week, usually Wednesdays. If you'd like to get that and get an article that'll just help you to think of something new, have a few new tools to use to lead and communicate with others, go to coachingforleaders.com/subscribe. That's the best way to get on. Have a great week, everybody. Take care.